My daughter-in-law humiliated me in front of everyone. It happened at my grandson's engagement party, an evening that was supposed to be filled with laughter, warm hugs, and the quiet pride of a grandmother watching her family grow. Instead, it became the moment I realized I had been nothing more than a carefully tolerated inconvenience. I didn't react. I smiled, and that was their first mistake. I'm glad you're here. Stay with me until the end, and tell me where you're listening from. I've learned that stories like mine travel farther than we ever expect. The ballroom was elegant. White linens, crystal glasses, soft golden lighting reflecting off polished marble floors. I had spent the entire morning getting ready. Choosing a navy dress my late husband once said made me look like grace itself. At 68, you don't dress to impress anymore. You dress to feel like you still belong. My grandson, Ethan, stood near the center of the room, tall and confident, his hand wrapped around his fiancée's. I felt a quiet swell of pride just watching him. I had helped raise that boy when his parents were too busy building their careers. But as I approached the main table, something felt off. The seating cards were arranged neatly in gold script. I found my name, or rather, I found what they had written instead of my name. Family sponsor. 2 days earlier, everything had seemed normal, quiet, predictable, safe even. I woke up in my small kitchen just after sunrise, the soft light filtering through lace curtains I had chosen 20 years ago. The house felt larger these days, not because it had changed, but because the voices that once filled it were gone. My husband had been gone for 3 years, and with him, the balance. I poured my coffee slowly, the way I always had, 1 spoon of sugar, a little cream, stirred until the color turned just right. Some habits stay, even when everything else disappears. Claire had called me that morning. Her voice had been unusually warm. "We'd love for you to come early to the party," she said. "There are a few things we might need help with." Help. I should have recognized the word for what it meant. But I didn't. Or maybe I chose not to. I'd be happy to, I told her. And I meant it, because that's what I had always done. I showed up. I helped. I made things easier, even when no one noticed, even when no one said thank you. Looking back now, I can see the small cracks I ignored. The way Claire never asked how I was, only what I could do. The way my son, Daniel, had become quieter around me, as if conversation required effort he no longer wished to spend. The way decisions were made without me, then presented as if they were already final. At the time, I told myself it was normal. Children grow up. They build their own lives. They don't need you the same way anymore. That's what I believed, until that night proved something very different. That morning, I even stopped by the bank. There were a few transfers I wanted to finalize, small things, really. Adjustments to accounts I had been managing for years. I had always kept things organized, clear, fair. But as I sat across from the banker, reviewing documents I had trusted for decades, I felt something I hadn't felt before. A quiet hesitation, as if something inside me was asking a question I hadn't yet formed. "Would you like to review your beneficiaries again?" the banker asked. I smiled politely. "Yes," I said. "I think I would." I paused, just for a second, long enough for the meaning to settle in. Not grandmother, not even my name, just the one who pays. I heard laughter behind me, light, polished, almost elegant. I turned slightly and saw my daughter-in-law, Claire, standing with a small group of her friends. She didn't even try to hide it. "Oh, don't look so serious," she said when our eyes met. "It's just a little joke. Everyone knows you've always been generous." Generous. That was a polite word for what I had been. A wallet. I felt every pair of eyes in the room shift toward me. Not openly, not rudely, but enough to feel it. The kind of attention that doesn't need words. My son stood nearby. He said nothing. He didn't step forward, didn't correct her, didn't even look at me. That silence was louder than anything she could have said. I placed the card back on the table carefully, smoothed the edge. Then I took my seat. "I think it's fitting," Claire added lightly, raising her glass. After all, none of this would be possible without support. More laughter. Soft, controlled, cruel, in a way that polite society always is. I lifted my glass too, not to drink, just to hold something steady in my hand. I smiled, because in that moment, I understood something very clearly. This wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't a joke. This was deliberate. And as I sat there, surrounded by people who thought I didn't notice, didn't understand, didn't matter, I made a decision. I would not defend myself. I would not argue. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me hurt. No, I would let them believe I was exactly what they thought I was. Harmless, oblivious, easy to use. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is let people underestimate you. The morning after the party, I didn't cry. I didn't sit in silence replaying every word, every laugh, every look. I made breakfast, toast, eggs, coffee, the same routine I had followed for years. Because grief, when it's real, doesn't always come with tears. Sometimes it comes with clarity. I was halfway through my coffee when the doorbell rang. It was early, too early for a casual visit. I wasn't expecting anyone. For a moment, I considered not answering. But something, call it instinct or maybe just habit, pushed me to stand up and walk to the door. When I opened it, I found a woman I hadn't seen in over a decade. "Margaret," she said, her voice uncertain but hopeful. It took me a second. Then I recognized her. Linda Carter. She had worked with my husband years ago, back when he still ran his consulting firm out of the small office downtown. Linda had been his assistant for nearly 15 years. She looked older now. Of course, we all did. But there was something else in her expression. Something tight. Careful. "I'm sorry to come unannounced," she said. But I didn't know who else to talk to. I stepped aside. "Come." We sat in the kitchen, the same place where I had just been trying to convince myself that nothing had changed. I poured her coffee. She didn't touch it. Her hand stayed wrapped around the cup, fingers tense, as if she were holding herself together. "I went to the party last night," she said quietly. That surprised me. I hadn't noticed her. But then again, I hadn't been looking beyond my own small humiliation. "I saw what happened," she continued. I gave a small smile. "It was nothing," I said. "Just a misunderstanding." She shook her head. "No," she said. "It wasn't." There was no hesitation in her voice. "No pelaitnis." Just certainty. And something in the way she said it made me stop pretending. For the first time since the party, I didn't brush it off. I didn't soften it. I just looked at her. "What do you mean?" I asked. Linda took a breath. The kind you take when you know what you're about to say can't be taken back. "I've been working with Claire," she said. That made my stomach tighten. "Working how?" "She hired me 6 months ago," Linda replied. "Part-time, to help with financial organization, investments, transfers, that kind of thing." I felt something shift inside me. Slow, cold, and I asked. Linda's fingers tightened around the coffee cup. "I didn't realize at first," she said. "I thought everything was legitimate. The accounts were in your family's name. The documents looked normal." Normal. Such a dangerous word. "But then I started noticing patterns," she continued. "Transfers that didn't quite add up. Authorizations that were indirect." I didn't interrupt. I didn't need to. I already knew where this was going. Or at least, I thought I did. "She's been moving money," Linda said finally. "Not stealing it outright. Not in a way that would trigger alarms. But redirecting it. Gradually. Quietly." My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. Instead, everything inside me became still. "How much?" I asked. Linda hesitated. "Over the past 6 months," she said. "Just under $200,000. 200,000. The number hung in the air between us. Heavy, precise, unavoidable. "And my son?" I asked. Linda's eyes dropped. "I don't think he knows everything," she said carefully. "But he signed off on enough that he should have asked questions." Of course he should have. But he didn't. Because asking questions requires the willingness to hear answers you might not like. "And the house?" I asked. That was the question that mattered most. Linda looked up at me then. Really looked. As if measuring whether I was ready for what came next. "She's been preparing documents," she said slowly. "To restructure ownership. To move assets into joint control, then eventually into her name." Eventually. Such a polite word for something so deliberate. I leaned back in my chair. Not in shock. Not in disbelief. But in recognition. Because suddenly, everything made sense. The jokes. The seating card. The subtle shifts in tone. The way I had been repositioned. not as family, but as a resource. They weren't just disrespecting me. They were replacing me. Quietly. Legally. Permanently. I didn't know how to tell you, Linda said softly. But after last night, I couldn't stay silent. I nodded. Not quickly. Not dramatically. Just once. You did the right thing, I said. And I meant it. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Linda reached in her bag and placed a folder on the table. I made copies, she said, of everything I could access. I looked at the folder. Didn't open it. Not yet. Because in that moment, something far more important had already been revealed. Not the documents. Not the numbers. But the truth. They thought I was weak. They thought I didn't understand. They thought I would never see it coming. And that was their second mistake. After Linda left, I stayed at the kitchen table for a long time. The folder sat in front of me, untouched. Sunlight moved slowly across the wood grain. My coffee had gone cold. Somewhere outside, a lawnmower started up, steady and ordinary, the kind of suburban sound that usually made life feel manageable. That morning, it sounded far away. I finally opened the folder with both hands, carefully, the way you open something fragile, even when you already know it contains damage. There were printed transfers, authorization forms, account summaries, notes in neat columns, dates circled in blue ink. A paper trail built not from one dramatic theft, but from dozens of quiet decisions, each one small enough to seem harmless on its own. A few thousand here, a transfer there, an account change from individual oversight to shared access. Language softened with words like convenience, efficiency, consolidation. It was all so civilized. That was the part that chilled me. Cruelty is easier to recognize when it arrives yelling. When it wears a calm face and polished shoes, people call it planning. I read each page once, then again, not because I didn't understand, but because I did. And once I understood, I couldn't stop seeing it. Not just in the folder. In the last few years. In the little moments I had explained away. I leaned back and let the memories come, one by one, like pieces sliding into place. The first was Thanksgiving 2 years earlier. I had offered to host the way I always used to. I still remember standing in Claire's kitchen while she arranged flowers in a tall glass vase. Her back to me, her tone casual. "That's sweet," she had said. "But this year I think something smaller makes more sense." Smaller. There were 18 people at that dinner. I saw the photos later online. Everyone smiling around a long table lit with candles. My grandson wearing the sweater I gave him. My son carving the turkey. Claire at the center, one hand on the serving platter, the other on Daniel's shoulder, looking exactly like the woman who had made it all happen. At the time, Daniel told me there had been a misunderstanding. Claire said she thought I was tired and probably wouldn't enjoy the noise. I had accepted that explanation, not because it made sense, because mothers become experts at accepting what hurts them when the alternative is admitting they are no longer wanted. Then there was the Christmas after that. Claire had called me 3 days before and asked, very sweetly, whether I could bring my silver serving pieces. She said the table would look so beautiful with family heirlooms. I polished them myself, wrapped each one in soft towels, drove 40 minutes through freezing rain. When I arrived, Claire met me at the door with that same polished smile and said, "Oh, I thought Daniel told you. We're keeping dinner immediate family only. But thank you for bringing these." Immediate family. I stood there on the front step, holding a velvet case full of silver that had belonged to my mother. Through the doorway, I could hear voices. Laughter. Music. At least a dozen people. One of Claire's cousins passed behind her carrying a tray of glasses. Immediate family. I remember smiling then, too. Not because I believed her. Because there are humiliations so precise, so deliberate, that reacting only gives the other person what they want. So I handed her the silver, told her to enjoy the evening, and drove home alone. At the time, I told myself that maybe I had misheard. Maybe plans had changed. Maybe Claire was overwhelmed. Maybe. A woman can bury herself under maybes if she is not careful. Then came smaller things, changes I barely noticed until they form a pattern. Claire offering to help with my paperwork more often than necessary. Daniel asking casual questions about my accounts, my will, my monthly expenses. Not rude questions, Concerned ones. Practical. Just so we know how to help Mom. Just in case anything ever happens. Just trying to make things easier. Easier for whom, I wondered now. I remember a Sunday afternoon when Daniel came by alone, something that had become rare. He stood in the doorway of my den, looking at the framed photos on the mantel while I sorted old receipts. "You should really simplify things," he said. "You've got too many separate accounts." I laughed lightly and told him I liked knowing where everything was. He didn't laugh back. Claire had been the one to suggest I stop driving at night. Claire had been the one to recommend a financial planner I had never heard of. Claire had been the one who said houses like mine were a lot of responsibility for someone at this stage. At this stage. Such a careful phrase. Not old, not incapable, just nearing irrelevance. I closed the folder and rested my palm on top of it. The room was quiet again, but it no longer felt empty. It felt exposed. That was the worst part of recognition. Once the truth arrives, it shines backward. It lights up years of conversations, years of little exclusions, years of smiling comments that were never really comments at all. They had not suddenly become cruel. They had simply grown bolder, because I had made it easy for them, not by being weak, by being decent, by assuming love where there was strategy, by mistaking access for closeness. I stood and walked to the living room, where the family photos still lined the built-in shelves. There was one of Daniel at 8 years old, grinning through missing front teeth, his arm thrown around my waist. One of Ethan in a Little League uniform, his cap tilted too far back. One of all of us on the beach, years ago, before Claire learned how to rearrange every room she entered until it centered around her. I picked up the beach photo and studied it. Claire was there too, though just barely, standing at the edge of the frame, still new, still pretty, still smiling like someone eager to belong. I try to remember when that changed. Or maybe it never did. Maybe belonging had never been her goal. Control was. And control, unlike affection, leaves records. That thought steadied me. Because grief is shapeless, but documents are not. Memories can be doubted. Paper cannot. I set the photo down and returned to the kitchen. The folder was still there, waiting. So was the bank appointment I had nearly canceled that morning. I looked at the clock. I still had time. For the first time in a very long while, I did not feel hurt. I felt organized. There's a difference. Pain scatters you. Clarity arranges things. Claire had humiliated me in public because she thought the story was already over. She believed I was too old, too isolated, too sentimental to understand what was happening around me. She was wrong. And as I gathered the folder, my keys, and my handbag, I realized something else. I was done trying to be included in a place where I was only being managed. From that moment on, I did not need their affection. I needed accuracy. And accuracy, I had learned, could be far more dangerous. The bank was 15 minutes away. I locked the front door behind me. And for the first time since the engagement party, I wasn't looking backward. I was thinking 3 steps ahead. At the bank, nothing looked different. The same marble floors, the same polite smiles, the same quiet professionalism that makes people believe everything inside those walls is safe. I sat across from Mr. Henderson, a man I had worked with for nearly 12 years. He greeted me the same way he always did, respectful, calm, just warm enough to feel personal but not enough to cross any lines. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, folding his hands neatly on the desk. "What can I help you with today?" I placed the folder in front of him. "I'd like to review everything," I said. Not rushed, not emotional, just precise. He opened the folder slowly, his eyes scanning the first few pages. At first, his expression didn't change. Then something shifted, subtle but unmistakable. His posture straightened, his tone sharpened. "Where did you get these?" he asked. "I prefer to focus on what they show," I replied. A small pause. Then he nodded. "Of course." We spent the next hour going through everything. Account by account. Transfer by transfer. Every signature. Every authorization. Every quiet adjustment that had been made under the guise of family management. By the time we finished, the air in the room felt different. He closed the folder carefully. "There are irregularities," he said. "Not illegal on the surface, but structured in a way that suggests intent." Intent. That word again. Always polite. always distant, never quite naming what it really is. I want to make changes, I said. What kind of changes? I met his eyes. Everything. And for the first time, I saw something close to approval in his expression. That evening, I called Claire. Not to confront her, not to accuse, just to talk. Hi, Claire, I said, my voice as steady as ever. I've been thinking about the other night. Oh, she replied, light, almost amused. I hope you're not still upset. It was just a joke. Of course it was. I understand, I said. And you're right about something. A pause. I'm getting older, I continued. And managing everything alone, it's been more difficult than I expected. Silence. Not long, but long enough. The kind of silence where opportunity begins to take shape. Well, she said carefully, we've always wanted to help. I know, I replied. That's why I'd like to make things easier. For all of us. I could almost hear her smile. What do you have in mind? I think it's time we simplified things, I said. Accounts, property, responsibilities. Another pause. Longer this time. Daniel will be so relieved to hear that, she said. Relieved? Yes. I was sure he would be. We spoke for a few more minutes. Light conversation. Plans for another family dinner. Nothing unusual. Nothing that would raise suspicion. When I hung up, I set the phone down gently. Then I sat in silence. Not because I was unsure, but because everything was now moving exactly where I needed it to go. The next week was productive. Quietly, deliberately. Every morning, I returned to the bank. Not the front desk. Private offices. Closed doors. Legal language. I updated everything. Accounts that once had shared access were returned to sole ownership. Authorizations were revoked. New conditions were added. Carefully written, legally binding, impossible to misinterpret. My will was revised. Not dramatically. Not emotionally. Just accurately. If respect was absent, so would be entitlement. Mr. Henderson worked closely with my attorney, a woman named Patricia Wells, who spoke very little and missed nothing. You've been generous, she said at one point, reviewing the documents. More than most. I was appropriate. I corrected gently. She glanced up. And now I'm precise. She didn't smile, but she nodded. Claire invited me to dinner that Sunday. Her tone was warmer than usual. Almost eager. I accepted. Of course I did. Their house hadn't changed. Still immaculate. Still arranged in that careful way Claire preferred. Everything in place, nothing out of line. Dinner was pleasant. Too pleasant. Daniel asked about my week. Claire refilled my glass before it was empty. Ethan talked about wedding plans. Everything looked perfect, which is how I knew it wasn't. Halfway through the meal, Claire leaned forward slightly. So, she said, casual but focused, have you given any more thought to simplifying things? There it was. I set my fork down. I have, I said. And I think it's a good idea. Daniel exhaled, almost imperceptibly. Claire smiled. Not wide, not openly, but enough. We just want what's best for you, she said. I know, I replied. And for the first time, that sentence had nothing to do with belief. Only timing. 2 weeks later, I invited them over. All of them. Claire, Daniel, Ethan, even a few extended relatives. I told them I had something important to share. They arrived curious, relaxed, expecting something simple. Claire brought wine. Daniel brought dessert. Ethan hugged me the way he always had, warm, genuine, unaware of the currents moving beneath the surface. We gathered in the living room. The same room where family photos still lined the shelves. The same room where everything once felt unquestioned. I stood near the fireplace. Hands folded, posture steady. I've spent the past few weeks reviewing my affairs. I began. No one interrupted. I realized something important. I continued. I've spent most of my life trying to take care of this family. A few nods. Soft agreement. Claire's expression was calm, confident. And in doing so, I said, I may have made things too easy. A slight shift in the room. Subtle. But there. I've corrected that. I added. Now, Daniel frowned slightly. Claire didn't move. Not yet. I've restructured my accounts, I said. Updated my will. Clarified ownership of all properties. Silence. Heavy. Precise. Then Claire spoke. What exactly does that mean? She asked. Her voice was still smooth. but no longer relaxed. I reached for the folder on the table beside me. The same folder, but thicker now. Complete. It means, I said calmly, that everything now reflects exactly what it should have all along. I looked at her, not with anger, not with accusation, just clarity, and nothing more. The room didn't erupt. There were no raised voices, no dramatic reactions, just a quiet, growing realization moving from one face to another. Claire's smile faded. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Daniel leaned forward. "Mom," he began, but I raised my hand gently, not to silence him, to control the moment, because this wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about sequence, and this was only the beginning. No one spoke for a few seconds. That kind of silence, it's different. It's not confusion. It's recognition. Claire was the first to recover. "Margaret," she said, her voice softer now, controlled. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." "Of course. There always is." I opened the folder. Slowly. No ruse. No drama. Just paper against paper. "I agree," I said. "There has." I pulled out the first document and placed it on the table. A transfer record. Highlighted. Dated. Signed. Daniel leaned forward. His eyes moved across the page. Then again. Slower. Claire didn't look yet. She stayed still, watching me, measuring. "This is one of many," I said calmly. "Small amounts. Structured movements. Nothing that raises alarms individually." I placed another page down, and another. The sound of paper stacking echoed louder than it should have, because everyone in that room understood what paper meant. Proof. Not opinion. Not accusation. Fact. I had everything reviewed. I continued. Independently. That word landed. Independently. Claire finally reached for the documents. Her fingers were steady, but just slightly slower than before. "That doesn't prove anything," she said. "We're managing things together. For convenience." Convenience. Such a careful word. I nodded once. "Yes," I said. "That's exactly how it was framed." I slid one more document forward. This one thinner. More precise. Legal. "A draft transfer of property ownership," I said. "Prepared, but not yet executed." Daniel's head snapped up. "What?" he said. Claire didn't answer. Didn't move. Didn't breathe. "For the house," I added. "My house." Now the silence broke. "Claire." Daniel's voice was no longer calm. "What is she talking about?" She exhaled slowly, then smiled. But it wasn't the same smile anymore. It was tighter, sharper. "This is ridiculous," she said. "We were planning for the future. For stability." "Whose stability?" I asked. No anger. No raised voice. Just a question. And questions are dangerous when the answers are obvious. Daniel looked between us. Confused. Unsteady. "You told me everything was just organizational," he said to her. "It is," she replied quickly. "She's overreacting." I didn't correct her. I didn't need to, because the documents were already doing that for me. I closed the folder, not because I had nothing left, but because I had already shown enough. "This isn't about money," I said. That caught their attention. "It's about accuracy." Claire let out a small, dismissive laugh. "Accuracy," she said. "After everything we've done for you?" There it was. The shift. From denial to entitlement. I held her gaze. "Yes," I said. "Exactly." I reached for a different document. Thicker. Stamped. Final. "My will has been updated," I said. Daniel stiffened. Claire went completely still. "Effective immediately," I continued. "All previous arrangements are void." Silence. Again. But this time, it wasn't uncertain. It was heavy. Final. "Any individual found to have manipulated financial access," I said, "or attempted to redirect ownership of assets without explicit authorization," I paused. "Not for effect, for clarity, is excluded from all inheritance." Daniel's face went pale. "Mom," he said. Claire didn't speak, didn't move, didn't even blink, because now she understood. Not the accusation, not the evidence, the consequence. "You can't be serious," she said finally. "I am," I replied. Daniel stood up. "This is insane," he said. "We were trying to help you." "Help requires consent," I said. "You never said no. You never asked." That ended it. Right there. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just completely. No one argued after that. Not really. There were words. Of course there were. Excuses. Half-formed explanations. Attempts to soften what couldn't be softened. But none of it mattered. Because the truth, once spoken clearly, doesn't need to defend itself. It simply remains. Claire gathered her things first. Her movements were precise, controlled, but her eyes never met mine again. Daniel lingered. Asosdo, caught between who they were and who they chose to become. I didn't know, he said quietly. I believed him. That was the tragic part. I know, I replied. He looked at me then. Really looked. For the first time in a long while. I thought he started, but he didn't finish. Because some thoughts, once broken, don't survive being spoken. Ethan hugged me before he left. Tight, confused, unaware of everything that had just shifted beneath him. And then the house was quiet again. The same quiet as before, but different. Before it had been empty. Now, it was clear. I walked into the living room and stood in front of the photos again. Same faces, same smiles, but I saw them differently now. Not as they were, as they had been. I turned off the lights, one by one. No anger, no regret, just completion. Because I hadn't destroyed anything. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't fought. I had simply removed access. And sometimes, that's the most powerful ending there is.